And good night, bang!
That was great. What? What is this?
Is this from a lot of talk about Switchblade?
My God! What the hell? That's Chris Jericho! Chris Jericho! It's Chris Jericho! What is this?
Kenny Omega. What a dynamic performer. What a fantastic, tremendous performer. But he's not the best in the world. I am. So many have claimed to be the best, from Shawn Michaels to Edge to CM Punk, but they're all gone, and I'm still here. Because I am the best in the world. I am the greatest of all time. I am the alpha of this business. And I'm going to prove it. Because I'm challenging you, Kenny.
What?
Jericho versus Kenny.
What?
Alpha versus Omega. To see who is really the best. I want to meet you. January 4th.
What?
Wrestle Kingdom 12 in the Tokyo Dome.
That can't even happen, can it?
So let's see who's really the best. Bitch.
Oh my God!
Did I just see what I think I saw? What just happened?
All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Podcast Express. Wow, we got a breaking news audio edition of the show. It's not our usual Thursday night show. We're just kind of doing this on a Sunday before the 49ers get ready to play the Arizona Cardinals. And I thought it was a big enough deal that we could actually do a good 30 minutes on Chris Jericho and Kenny Omega being set up for Wrestle Kingdom 12. So, hey, Joe, thanks for coming on today, man. How you doing?
Doing pretty good, man. And yeah, I think honestly probably the biggest news story in wrestling in a while, and maybe the biggest match in New Japan history. I mean, I'm sure they've had other, huge money matches, but in terms of what this means to their American view, I mean, this is probably the best way to get Americans to start watching a really great product. So yeah. Good for them.
Yeah, I think this is the biggest deal that they can make to expand into the U.S. And I wrote a little article for the gtppodcast.com website saying just that this it's not the most important match in New Japan history, because they've had matches where they had 60 million people watching all at once back in the 60s and 70s, but for their expansion into the U.S., I would absolutely say that this might end up being the most important match in New Japan Pro Wrestling history, because without the U.S. expansion, they're always going to be more of a regional territory. Not an indie. I would never call them an indie, because indie shows don't do 40,000 people instead of a dome, so I would never say that, but definitely more of a territorial promotion, and now they're expanding worldwide, and they're expanding into the U.S. market. And if they got Chris Jericho on board, that's a huge deal.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Chris Jericho is a worldwide star. I mean, his time in WWE and WCW and his time with Fozzy, the guy, he is a legitimate rock star as well. He has a big following. Not that social media numbers mean everything, but he does have 3.3 million followers on Twitter. That's a huge advertising base for you, with him talking about Wrestle Kingdom. His fans who probably have never even watched New Japan before, you have an entirely new set of eyes on it because of one wrestler. He's probably the biggest guy out there that New Japan could have locked down to face Kenny Omega at Wrestle Kingdom. And honestly, I'd be surprised if we see this match only happen once. I would say we see it a couple times.
Well, I'm predicting that it's a one-off deal Only because, Jericho has stated in the past that he would never work for anybody other than Vince McMahon. And I see him coming back to WWE one day. Maybe after his Jericho cruise is done and over with. But, you're right. This absolutely could be a multiple match series. I'm predicting it's a one-match deal. But, you never know with Jericho. He always he leaves people hanging. He's the most unpredictable guy in wrestling, I would say. And just when you think he is, he's going to be laying low, he's not going to be wrestling, and all of a sudden he pops up. And this was honestly the last thing that I expected. I never in the world expected him to show up on New Japan television challenging Kenny Omega for Wrestle Kingdom 12 at all.
Yeah, well, I mean, as late as last night, he was saying on Twitter, I want no part of New Japan. I want no part of the Tokyo Dome. But I have another place in mind, you know, and he gave his little cruise ship, which, we discussed. We thought it was logical for it to happen on the Jericho cruise. I mean, they've already got the Young Bucks there. They're going to have other Ring of Honor guys. It made sense. And then for it to change just completely overnight within the sound of a few hours, I mean, everything changed. Because when Jericho tweeted that out last night, Omega said, I'll leave this alone for now, but I'll have a response at noon Eastern tomorrow. And then within the matter of a couple hours, the entire story just changed. They had a new challenge, and it was set for Wrestle Kingdom. I didn't expect this at all. That was not the news I expected to wake up to today. Yeah, well, and I especially didn't expect to wake up to the news at fucking 5:30 in the morning from a text message from you asshole. My bad. Sometimes I forget I'm 2 hours ahead.
Yeah. I got a text message, and I was like thinking it was like, okay, it's 5:30 in the morning. It's probably got to be an emergency. Let me look. And it's like, oh, Jericho's coming back to fucking New Japan. I was like, oh shit. What the and then after I saw it, I couldn't sleep. So I've just been up ever since then because I was so excited to talk about it. and then I was so excited to see the video that you sent me. So so I do forgive you for that, but you're still an asshole for waking me up at 5:30 in the morning.
My bad. You got to be up at 5:30 in the morning anyway, you old ass. It's Sunday.
Yeah. Oh man. But that's awesome. And Wrestle Kingdom 12 is looking to be one of the, it could end up being one of the biggest wrestling events of all time. I mean, it's not going to be WrestleMania status, because WrestleMania does so much box office here in the States, and they're not going to be able to do that in Japan. They're not. But if they do put it on pay-per-view, maybe we see them doing a lot of numbers. I get the feeling it's just going to be a New Japan World thing, and so maybe it ups their subscriber count by quite a bit just by having a star of Jericho's caliber on it. And the interest in this match alone is going to take this event into a whole new stratosphere.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can tell you, I've never paid for New Japan, and I've been watching them for about a year, and I've never taken the time to pay for it. But Wrestle Kingdom this year, I will, purely because of Chris Jericho. I mean, the intrigue is there to see, because his last run in WWE was my favorite run of his. The guy still has it. So to see him against Kenny Omega, who legitimately, can stake claim to at least the top three, maybe the best in the world, depending on what style you like. To see Jericho going up against that, we've seen him go against AJ Styles, and it was phenomenal, no pun intended. So for the first time, whether it be on pay-per-view or on New Japan World, I will be paying to see a New Japan show. I'm excited to put my money into that product and see what they deliver that night. It's going to suck to have to, start watching wrestling at whatever 2, 3 a.m. Not excited about that, but hopefully it's worth it.
Well, I mean, it'll be on demand as soon as it's over. I think New Japan World does a lot like WWE Network in that respect. So yeah. It's definitely worth it. So if you do get New Japan World, I'm just going to need your password.
Okay, sounds fair. And for me personally, I can go back and watch matches, on demand and still enjoy them, but there's just something special to me about watching it as it happens. For this event, I'm probably not going to do it ever again unless they pull out something insane for Wrestle Kingdom in 2019. Daniel Bryan knocking on the door, but I probably wouldn't do it again. But for this event, I'll go ahead and watch it live because I don't want to have to worry about spoilers. I don't want to have to worry about anything like that. I hate trying to avoid that stuff. I really appreciate being able to be on social media and interacting with other people from around the world as it's happening. So I'm looking forward to doing this for New Japan, just a couple months away.
Yeah, absolutely. In New Japan, like I said, the Wrestle Kingdom show is going to be one of the biggest events of all time. And the main event, believe it or not, Jericho Omega, to you American wrestling fans who would think that would be the main event. No, the main event's going to be Okada and Naito. And if anybody thinks that Omega Jericho is going to be the best match on the show, you got another thing coming. It's going to be Omega Naito, and I don't even think it's going to be close. I mean, that's box office. That's going to be a huge attraction, and I'm really looking forward to that match. And I think Tanahashi versus is Ibushi, right? Ibushi, or is it going to be Jay White?
I think it's Jay White, because I looked at a card earlier and I didn't see Ibushi on it, because all the way up until this morning, my assumption was it was Ibushi versus Omega. I thought that was the match that was going to happen. So obviously things got changed. So from the last I had seen, Ibushi's not on the card quite yet. Clearly, that'll change. He's going to end up on it, but as of right now, I don't think he has an opponent set for it.
Yeah. So I could have swore I saw a thing on Twitter earlier that said it was going to be Tanahashi versus Jay White. Jay White was Switchblade, and that's been an ongoing storyline in New Japan. So I don't know where that leaves Ibushi. I think Ibushi's one of the best guys out there, and hopefully he gets a spot on the card and not as Tiger Mask W like last year. I think I thought it was a waste of Ibushi, but I mean, Wrestle Kingdom 12. I'm excited about it. I will not be watching it live as it happened. I'll be watching it on demand afterwards, because and it's going to be on a weekday, isn't it? Like January 4th?
I don't know. I thought it might have been a Saturday night, Sunday morning.
Oh, well, if it's that, maybe I will do that. But I think it might be a weekday, and if it's on a weekday, then there's no possible way I can do it. I would love to take leave for wrestling, but it's just not happening.
Right. Now, and going back to the main event thing, it really does depend on what your definition of a main event is, because when Dave Meltzer talks about main events for WrestleMania, it's the most heavily promoted match, not necessarily the match that goes on last. Honestly, I would say Jericho versus Omega will be the most heavily promoted match. It'll probably be the match that the most new fans are watching for, so it could stake claim to main event, even if it's not the final match of the night, which obviously Okada and Naito will be.
Well, it'll be the most heavily promoted match in the States, but in Japan, make no mistake about it, Okada Naito is going to be the biggest match in Japan. Like, that's what the Japanese fans are most interested in. Okada and Naito are far more popular than Omega is out there. I mean, Los Ingobernables merchandise outsells Bullet Club merchandise in Japan. Now, worldwide, it's a different story, because they have more of a worldwide reach. But in the country of Japan, those guys are the most over.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's nothing wrong with going a double main event. I mean, that's not bad business at all. Now, correct me if I'm wrong.
They typically do like a triple main event style, kind of what WrestleMania does. So they've really built it up with like their WrestleMania.
Right. Now, Jericho he's wrestled in New Japan before, right?
Oh, yeah. He wrestled in New Japan in the 90s. He was in the J-Cup tournament, which is like where all the best junior heavyweight wrestlers kind of come together for one big tournament. And he was actually, did you read my article about the match?
Not yet.
Oh, okay. So he was actually tag team partners with Gato, and Gato is the head booker for New Japan. And he was a tag team partners with Gato in this wrestling promotion that's no longer around called WAR, which stands for Wrestling and Romance, which is, just a kind of a fucked up Japanese kind of, it was like DDT before DDT was even around. That was, WAR. Yeah. And they were a very popular tag team. And they're really good friends. Gato was actually on Jericho's podcast, so he has plenty of ties to New Japan. And he loves wrestling in Japan. Every time WWE does a tour there, even when he's not actively with the company, a lot of times he will go, A, to wrestle in front of his old fans from Japan, and B, to see his old friends like Gato and Jado from New Japan, and Red Shoes and all those guys that he's been friends with. Plus, Don Callis is the head English announcer there, and he's from Winnipeg. And Kenny Omega, also from Winnipeg. Omega got Callis's job with New Japan, and they all did a podcast together last year. So there's been a lot of connections. I'm sure they've been working on him for a while. He has no contract to WWE whatsoever, so he's free to do as he pleases. But this will be the first time. This was the first time he's appeared on a wrestling show outside of WWE since 1999. So this is a huge deal. Yeah,
and for everybody, there are people out there on Twitter right now saying, WWE's getting something from this. Jericho wouldn't do this without approval from Vince McMahon.
No, that's wrong.
That's wrong.
Yeah.
Chris Jericho is a businessman, and he first and foremost cares about his business more than anything else. And as you stated, he has wrestled for New Japan before, and he still has connections over there. So This is just Jericho, going into business for himself. Vince McMahon understands what wrestling is. He's not going to be offended by this. As much as he may or may not hate the Bullet Club, he knows the business, and he's not going to get offended or blacklist Jericho, because when Jericho comes calling and wants to do something with WWE again, Vince McMahon will have him back in a heartbeat. Maybe Jericho mentioned something to Omega about going to WWE in the future. Maybe not. Who knows?
Right.
But don't think that this is happening for WWE to get something in return.
No, he's not like a double agent going to New Japan. No. That's not. I mean, the feud between New Japan and WWE is not that big. So WWE is clearly head and shoulders above the rest. They have no competition whatsoever. So this is not one of those things. It's just Jericho probably wanting to live out one of his dreams and wrestle on Wrestle Kingdom 10 or Wrestle Kingdom 12 with one of his friends from Winnipeg and making a shit ton of money. That's all this is about. So everybody calm down with the whole conspiracy theories.
Yeah, well, and I wanted to throw it out there because it was Justin LaBar who tweeted out today that
he's so full of shit.
Yeah, he said the only way he sees this working out is if WWE is getting something in return. And people try to point out the fact that WWE made a trade with TNA a couple of years ago for Ric Flair to come in for the Hall of Fame ceremony.
But Jericho's not under contract. It's totally
Jericho's
different.
not under contract. I have a good working relationship with my last boss, but when I want to go and take a new job, I don't go and get their permission first and pay them or give them some sort of return for letting me work somewhere else. That's not how business works.
Yeah.
Now, if Jericho was still under like a Legends deal, at least a Legends deal, maybe it's different, but he doesn't even have that. He comes and goes as he pleases. It's more of a situation like The Rock has, where Jericho's a draw. There's probably a handshake agreement. If he's going to work over a longer period of time, maybe they do a couple-month contract, but that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, hey, let's go ahead and get into this UFC show from last night. I know we're only going to do like a quick a quick little show, but I thought, well, since we're on the air already, let's go ahead and talk about the pay-per-view last night. UFC 217 was live from Madison Square Garden last night, live on pay-per-view. They had 3 title fights, and in my opinion, and I don't know how you feel about this, Joe, but I would say it was one of the best UFC pay-per-views of all time. Yeah,
man, it right up there, and it was one of those that made me... It really draws me back into UFC and made me remember why I liked watching mixed martial arts in the first place.
Yeah.
Because you have potentially a new star was created last night in Costa. That guy is legit. He looks the part. His striking is dangerous, and he put Johnny Hendricks down.
Yeah.
Then you have Rose. I can't remember her last name. I'm going to have to learn it.
Well, here I'll go ahead and run down each match, and then we'll kind of go ahead and talk about it. So, the main event, if you guys don't remember, was George St. Pierre coming off a 4-year layoff. George was the former welterweight champion. Welterweight is 170 pounds, and he's coming off a 4-year layoff. He hadn't fought since November of 2013, and he's coming up in weight to fight Michael Bisping, who is the middleweight champion at 185 pounds. And I didn't do very well on my picks fucking at all. So so next time, if you guys are like making bets based off of what I say, I just feel bad for you. So, they had to fight. George looked a lot bigger than he ever looked before. So he was huge. He actually looked bigger than Bisping to me. Now Bisping was like a couple inches taller, but as far as wide and just thickness goes, George St. Pierre was just huge. And I thought he had won the first round. He got a takedown. He didn't do much with it, and I thought he outstruck him a little bit. The second round, he got a takedown, didn't do anything with it. Michael got up pretty quickly and then outstruck him, and I thought Bisping won the second round. And in the second round, it looked like George was gassing a little bit. I don't know. He was taking a lot of deep breaths. I don't know if he was just trying to conserve his energy or what, but he was not the same GSP that we saw at 170 pounds, clearly. And then in the third round, he took him down immediately, and Bisping just started destroying him from his back. He busted him open with elbows. He was bleeding like a stuck pig, bleeding everywhere. They ended up getting stood up, and then it seemed like it was a desperation move to me. GSP throwing some pretty good strikes. It got him with the right hand, knocked him down, got on top of him, ground and pound with some elbows, and then ended up choking him out. And Bisping didn't tap. He passed out, so... I don't know if that was his way to be a cowboy or what, but I thought it was a great fight. What did you think of that fight? And what do you think about George St. Pierre at middleweight?
Yeah, he did look good. I mean, his striking, his kicks, I mean, they all just looked so crisp. I mean, purely by his striking, you couldn't tell the guy had ever been away. His cardio is what caught me off guard, because we're used to seeing GSP be able to go 5 rounds like it's nothing. And he did get gassed, and maybe this is the first time he's fought at that weight. He's not used to carrying all that extra muscle. I mean, it's a 15-pound difference, so that's going to play a factor. But everything else looked phenomenal for a guy who hasn't fought in 4.5 years. I mean, I was really impressed. I loved the fight itself. There was never a time I was bored. And seeing Bisping go to sleep, like, any other submission, go ahead and tap out, because it's not worth getting your arm or your leg or your ankle broken. You're not going to die from a sleeper hold. I mean, he's going to have to let go eventually. So if you don't want to be the champion who gave up, go to sleep. Let the fight end that way. And I admire that. Like, I hate Michael Bisping so much, but that to me is just awesome.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty cool. Bisping, actually, I just looked it up, and he said that he did not tap out for a reason. He said he would have tapped out, but he was already passed out before he realized he could do that. So, because that was a deep choke. I really don't think that GSP stays in middleweight. I just got a hunch. I don't think he wants any part of Robert Whittaker. Whittaker is a lot bigger than him. He's a lot faster than him. I think that Whittaker gives him way too much trouble. I think the money fight is George St. Pierre coming back down to welterweight to fight Tyron Woodley. I really do think that's the money fight right there.
Now, I don't know if I would call that the money fight. There would be a attraction to it, but I think the real money fight is Robbie Lawler going ahead and taking the title off of Woodley, and then having Robbie Lawler versus GSP. I think there's more intrigue in that, because after Woodley's last 2 fights, fans are kind of bored with him. I mean, they booed the shit out of him when he fought in July. He's become a boring fighter, and GSP's not the guy who is going to offset that. He's not going to just take the fight. He's a kind of stand your ground, throw jabs, and make you make mistakes until he connects with you. So I really think a lot of fans recognize that from both fighters, and that would probably be a pretty boring fight. So if it were me, for somebody who would want to spend money on the UFC card, it would be better money-wise, business-wise, if Robbie Lawler gets GSP at 170.
Well, yeah, but I think the ultimate money fight is Conor and GSP. And that's why I think GSP needs to go down, win the welterweight title, and then do a match with Conor eventually. His future's not in middleweight. All right, so the next fight was for the bantamweight championship. It was Cody Garbrandt versus TJ Dillashaw. Again, I was wrong. I picked Cody Garbrandt, and I didn't even think it was going to be close. And sure enough, in the first round, I was correct.
Yeah,
Garbrandt had knocked him down. I think that Dillashaw was clearly saved by the bell, and it was a good save because he came back in the second round. He was a different fighter, and Joe Rogan said it best. Dillashaw uses his kicks, and Cody Garbrandt doesn't. And Dillashaw kicked him right in the face. He got up, and then Dillashaw knocked him out. So good for TJ Dillashaw. He's the new bantamweight champion. He's a 2-time bantamweight champion. And immediately after the fight, he called for a match with some guy. What's his some midget fighter named Moose Johnson.
Yeah.
But anyway, he called out Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson. And he said he would cut to 125 to do that fight. And I think that is the fight to make for Dillashaw. Where Cody Garbrandt goes next, who knows? I think he's going to have to win a couple of fights to get back up into that spot. So, but I thought that was a really good fight. I was really excited for the fight. I thought it was going to be fight of the year. Turns out it wasn't because it ended so quickly. But it was awesome. What did you think?
Yeah, Cody Garbrandt, he has all the tools. But last night was probably the first time he fought emotionally. And you just can't do that. You can't go in there and be angry because you're going to make a mistake. And that's what happened. He was over aggressive. He left his hands down. He felt like he was expecting the kick to come to the body, and he just completely dropped his hands and took it right to the side of the head. He'll learn from this. I mean, it's the guy's first loss in the UFC, maybe the first loss in his professional career. But you got to go in there with a level head and not outthink yourself, not get too emotional. I think, I don't know if you heard this, but there was a rumor last night that Demetrius Johnson was trying to come into the ring to confront Dillashaw, but there was like a heavy wind from the crowd breathing, and it just carried him away.
I think he did, but he was so low to the ground the cameras didn't catch him. I think that might have been it too.
That's possible. But honestly, after the fight though, like I would like to see Garbrandt and Dillashaw again. I think if Garbrandt goes in there a little bit with a cleaner head, not so emotional, I think it's a lot better of a matchup. He outstruck him in the first round, and when he thought he could potentially have the knockout there, got saved by the bell. He never calmed himself down, and he just overthought.
Yeah, it's one of those things. If those guys fought 20 times, they'd probably split it down the middle. So,
yeah.
But I do think he needs to fight a couple times before he gets back into the title picture because he lost pretty decisively. The next fight was for the women's strawweight championship. That's 115 pounds. Sorry, it was Joanna Jędrzejczyk, the Boogie Woman, against Rose Thug Namajunas, and Namajunas knocked the fuck out of her.
She did.
In a complete shocker. She was calm, cool, and collected. She just, was not overwhelmed by the moment. I think, and I actually said it in my article for GTPpodcast.com, that she overmatched a clearly cocky champion and made herself a star. And I think that's exactly what she did.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Watching the weigh-ins of her just, Jędrzejczyk getting in her face and just, trying to be very intimidating, and Rose just standing there reciting the Lord's Prayer, just as calm and stone-faced as you can be, was badass. Like, she didn't feel overwhelmed by the moment at all. She went in there, and, it was the first time I've watched her fight. From what I've heard, she is a submission specialist. And to see somebody like that go out and box the champion and knock her out cold to where the champion had to tap out due to strikes. Yeah. You don't see that every day. That was badass.
Yeah, and I think they do an immediate rematch here. I know it was decisive, but Joanna has, defeated everybody, and it hasn't even been close. I think she came in overconfident. She got caught early. I'm not trying to take anything away from Namajunas' performance, but I think that Jędrzejczyk was the Ronda Rousey of that division basically, and I really do think they do an immediate rematch here.
Yeah, and one thing we've learned, it's interesting to see how champions like that bounce back from their first loss. Ronda Rousey got it, and she didn't come back from it. She fought again, but she was not the same, and she got knocked out decisively again.
Yeah, well,
Conor McGregor.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Conor McGregor, he went out there and got tapped out to Diaz and came out better than ever. So it's going to be interesting to see how a champion handles a decisive defeat like that.
Yeah, well, Joanna doesn't have the outside distractions that Ronda Rousey does. Like, she's not doing movies and commercials and all that stuff. So fighting is her only love, and I see her coming back better than ever.
I hope so. The women's divisions, it's always a good fight for me. I was not really excited when they first brought them into the UFC, but the more I've watched them, and became not such a piece of shit and was just hoping to see a titty fall out, the more I actually paid attention to women fights. They tend to be the best fights on the card. Oh, and last night proved it.
I think I'm gonna have to cut that.
Okay.
No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
No, I just say last night really proved it that there's so much skill set in there, and a lot of the names you don't necessarily get to hear as much, but when you sit down and watch them fight, they're always some of the best fights on the card.
Oh, absolutely.
And last night just really showed that you need to pay attention to women fights more often, because there's a lot more talent out there than you'd ever realize.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I thought that was a great fight. I think Namajunas knocked her into the upside down. I thought that was pretty cool because Namajunas looks just like 11 from season 1 of the Stranger Things. So
that's exactly what I said last night.
Yeah. The next fight was Stephen Wonderboy Thompson defeating Jorge Masvidal by unanimous decision. Not much to say about the fight. I thought they got it right. I think Masvidal won a round, but for the most part, it was all Stephen Thompson. Masvidal had no answers for him.
Yeah, I had it 2 rounds to 1, but there was some 30-26 scores in there, which was probably the only confusing thing about that fight to me.
It's because they said Thompson got a 10-8, but yeah, it's New York, so they're new to MMA, so what are you going to do? The guy you were talking about earlier, Paulo Costa, defeated a future Bellator fighter, Johnny Hendricks, by TKO at 123 of round number 2. I agree with you. I think Paulo Costa is going to be a huge star. He's a middleweight. He's undefeated. I think he's 11-0 now. He's learning English. He's jacked to the gills. If this guy doesn't test positive for steroids, I think the UFC has a huge star in the making.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, I, again, hadn't watched Costa before last night, but immediately when I seen Hendricks walk into the ring, I said, this guy's going to lose, because he was flabby. I mean, he's had an issue with his work ethic, with his conditioning, and you could see it last night. I mean, there was some jiggle to his belly, and the only guy who can pull that off and be kind of successful is Roy Nelson. Yeah. Johnny Hendricks is not that guy. He's got to be in shape when he steps in there. And not saying if he would have been in better shape, it would have made the difference last night, because Costa does look like just an absolute animal, but you can't go into a fight in the UFC in that kind of condition and expect to be able to win now.
Yeah, I think Johnny Hendricks' days as a top fighter are over. I think the UFC cuts this guy soon, and like I said, he ends up in Bellator, and he'll be fighting Chael Sonnen or somebody down the road. But,
yeah.
So on the main event of the FS1 pre-show, I don't know if you got a chance to watch any of these, so I'll just kind of run through them. James Vick defeated Joseph Duffy by TKO. I actually, on the show last week, I called him Patrick Duffy, so whoops. But Irish Joe Duffy is, get this, from Ireland, so who'd have thunk it? He defeated him by TKO punches at 4:59 of round number 2. In the heavyweight division, they had Mark Godbeer defeating Walt Harris by disqualification. Walt Harris kicked him in the nuts, and then while the referee was trying to stop it, he kicked him in the face and then got disqualified. So there you go. Ovent St. Preux defeated Corey Anderson in the light heavyweight division by knockout via head kick at 125 of round number 3. And then afterwards, Ovent St. Preux called out Ilir Latifi, who's a Swedish fighter who sucks. So I think he's just looking to pad his record on that one. Randy Brown defeated Mickey Gall. Mickey Gall is famous for knocking the fuck out of CM Punk, and he also beat Sage Northcutt. Turns out he's not as good as we thought he was. He was defeated by unanimous decision, and Curtis Blades in the heavyweight division defeated Alexei Olenek by TKO, doctor stoppage at 156 round 2. And the curtain jerker was Ricardo Ramos defeating Ayman Zahabi, who is Firas Zahabi's brother, Firas Zahabi being George St. Pierre's head coach. Knocked him out with a spinning back elbow at 158 of round number 3. So there you go. That was a complete UFC 217 rundown. If you're listening to the show and you realize that XWT is your friend, I would say this is a definite go out of your way to watch this pay-per-view. It was one of the best, one of my favorite pay-per-views I've ever seen. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. I watched the James Vick fight. Didn't get to watch much else of the prelims, but the entire pay-per-view was just phenomenal. Like, they delivered. Definitely got my money's worth out of it. And like I said, it may be one of those cards that it reminded me why I liked MMA in the first place, and will probably get me to watch more UFC in the future. Absolutely.
Well, hey, that's going to do it for us, everybody. We got to get ready to watch the 49ers get defeated by the Arizona Cardinals today. Although Jimmy Johnson did pick the 49ers today. I have no idea why. I don't know what he's got.
It's because Drew Stanton is going to be taking snaps for the Cardinals and not Colin Kaepernick, because Drew Stanton apparently is a better quarterback.
I guess. I guess Colin Kaepernick is going to interview with the Texans tomorrow. So there you go. All right, everybody, that's going to do it for us for today. This is a special edition breaking news audio of the Podcast Express. Check us out on Thursday night. We'll be dropping a new episode, a full episode, a full 1 hour of glory. And follow us on Twitter at the Pod Express. Joe, you are?
At Joe Gilbert 1992.
And I'm at Get Up Mike. Also, check out the Garbage Time Points podcast. They are at GTP Mike and Rick and at GTP Podcast. And you can check out our stuff on gtppodcast.com. All right, everybody. Thank you. Bye.